What's good, fools? We're reacting to three horrifying experiences with stalkers and strangers by Ripshy. Let's check it out.
At the time this took place, I was an 18-year-old girl and I worked overnights at a gas station. Since I moved during COVID, it was hard finding a job, and this was the place that called me back first. The shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I was constantly watching the clock because of my state's lottery and alcohol laws. Normally, it was busy until about 12:30 to 1 a.m. Then after that, it was no more than a few people an hour until 5 a.m. hit. And this night, though, it was especially dead. After 11 p.m., there were very few people, probably because it was March and just starting to warm up. So from 11 to 1 a.m., the only people I'd seen were my overnight regulars and one or two delivery drivers. In my state, you have to stop selling alcohol at 1:30 a.m. Around 20 minutes before that, I got my first customer in about half an hour. He was a younger white man, no older than 40. He had longer dyed blonde hair and was wearing a white surfer t-shirt, which I took notice of because it's about 2,000 miles to the closest beach. As soon as I made eye contact with him, I felt disgusted. Not like I was going to throw up. I felt like when you wake up from a dream about falling off a cliff. It was like my entire body was screaming at me to get away from this guy. As he walked the 20 feet to the back of the store, where the checkout counter was, I had to physically fight myself to stay there and talk to him. When he reached the counter, he quickly turned and started looking at the medicine shelf that was right across the counter. He looked for about 2 minutes, grabbing and setting down multiple different things before walking to the left and grabbing a soda from the cooler. He turned and walked up to me and set it all down on the counter. It was a large U-shaped counter, with the only entrance into the register area being on the opposite side of both of us. Since it was during COVID, there was a large plastic shield also surrounding the entire counter, leaving maybe a 9-inch gap between it and the counter. Before I could scan the item, he grabbed it back and smiled at me.
This fool, what
"You
the
know what
fuck?
I'm do?" he asks. Not really wanting to answer, I probably mumbled back something like, "Yeah," which was a mistake, because as soon as I spoke, I could feel him sort of lock into me. He then asked me numerous personal questions about myself, like where I grew up. He then asked me if I went to the college that was in town. He then asked me where I went to high school. By this point, I was creeped out enough that I figured I couldn't just stay quiet while he asked these creepy questions. Or maybe he would conclude that I was an easy target.
For real.
With every question that he asked, I gave a bullshit answer. I even lied about having a boyfriend that I snuck into the conversation. At the end of this interrogation-like conversation, he still has the drink in his hand. He then turns and puts it back in the cooler and exclaims that he changed his mind. All of the phone accessories were kept behind the counter to deter theft. They were on a large turning display that had 4 sides. He told me he was looking for a charger, and I asked him which type. He then said that if he saw the one he needed, he would probably know.
This fool, just tell
He
little
asked me to
bro.
turn
He should have
around
just
while he
told her.
looked.
This was tripping. He's up to something for sure, way.
The entire time, I could feel him staring at me. He then says he found what he wanted, and he pointed to a pop socket. I told him the thing that he was pointing at was a phone accessory and not a charger. He asked me to bring it over to him anyways, and I walked over to him and I slid it to him. He picked it up and looked at it, and he started asking questions about what it was and what it did, and what phone it was for. I explained what a pop socket was to the best of my ability, and he finally decided to purchase it. After he did, he stood by the counter and asked me to open it. So I did, with a pair of scissors, and I threw the trash away. I slid the pop socket over to him, and he didn't pick it up. He just kept staring at me. He then asked me to put it on his phone for him. By this point, this guy had been in the store for about 30 minutes, and nobody
Damn,
else had even
30
pulled up to get
minutes.
gas. I legit would have broken my own arm to get him to leave, So I quickly peel off the adhesive and stick it onto his phone. He then starts asking me more personal questions, and by this point I was praying to any and every god out there that somebody would walk through that door. He turned around while I stayed quiet, and I just looked at him. He then goes back to looking at the medicine shelf. He grabbed a box of Magnums and threw them on the counter. I rang him up and he pays cash again. I handed back the change, and I was leaning on the cigarette shelves about 5 feet away after. He finally walked out the door, and I thought that everything was over. But after 2 minutes, he walks back in and stands at the far end of the store with his back to me. I pull out my phone and I snapped a picture of him from behind. I texted the picture to my girlfriend, and I said if I get kidnapped, it's by this guy. And then I listed his description. After a couple of minutes, he walks up to the counter again. The men's bathroom is about 10 feet to the left of the counter. He asked me if he could use the bathroom, and I said, as long as nobody's in there. He then goes and pulls open the door and says, "Oh wow, there's a $20 bill on the ground." I didn't react or speak
Muffles cat.
after he says it, and he takes a couple steps closer. "Do you want it?" he asks. All I did was shake my head, and I went back to staring at the panic button that I was really considering pressing. He sighed, and then said, "Oh my god, someone shit all over the toilet seat. It's really bad." I didn't say anything,
No.
and he seemed to act offended. Am I supposed to pee in the bathroom like that? I looked at him, and I finally answered, "I'll clean it up later. You can just use the woman's if you want." He looked at me, almost with this glare, and he goes into the woman's bathroom. There was no way he was in there for more than 20 seconds before he opened the door again and went straight out the front door. But I planned on watching him this time, to see what car he got in and if he actually drove off. However, as soon as he walked out, somebody walked in the door. When I say the same time, I mean they literally opened the doors at the same exact time. As the creepy guy was walking out and the giant guy was walking in, I screamed to the 6'8" man. He just tried to get me alone in the bathroom. So this big guy turns around without hesitation and runs back out the door. Unfortunately for me, the creepy guy had already taken a seat in his Jeep, but he did in fact leave his windows all the way down. So this big guy starts screaming at him and asking him if he was trying to rape girls and shouting threats at him. While all this is happening, I'm calling the cops and I'm trying to give out as much info as possible.
For real, that fool was trying to do
someone
something.
else walked through the door, and it was Dan, my tow truck driver, who was a regular of our store. He showed up while the two guys were screaming at each other. The 6'8" guy still had the door propped open while he was yelling, and Dan walked a couple feet inside and asked me what happened. I was crying by this point, so I explained the best I could, and Dan went outside and started taking pictures of the creep's license plate. When the creep noticed, he quickly backed out and left the parking lot. The big guy ended up being a bouncer that had just left his shift at a strip club down the road. I thanked him and I bought his drinks for him. Dan came inside and comforted me while we waited for the cops to show up. After I filed the report and got Dan's number in case the cops needed the plate number, I worked for the rest of the 2.5 hours left of my shift. After I told my boss what happened, and I called off for the next day to recover, I walked to my car at 6:30 a.m.-ish. As soon as I started my car, I saw Dan's tow truck pull in beside me. He motioned for me to roll my window down, so I did. Dan then informs me that this man had followed him to his apartment complex after he left the gas station and was driving around his apartment complex screaming. He cautioned me to be very careful and to call him if I saw the guy ever again. I never got any updates or heard about that guy ever again. My name is Jabril, and me and all the people in this story were seniors in high school during this story. Back in March, me and some good friends decided to go to this abandoned haunted campsite that I had been to in 2022. It was me, two of my bros, and both of their girlfriends. I suggested the idea, and they all agreed. For this story, I'm going to use fake names for privacy. So, my friends' names were Tyler and Jordan. And Tyler's girl's name was Abigail, and Jordan's girl's name is Angela. We decided to enhance the experience by bringing alcohol and weed. We had 2 bottles of Henny and about 9 joints. We got there around 11:30 at night, so it was pitch black. We had flashlights, gloves, etc., so we were pretty serious about exploring this place. About 15 minutes in, Angela and Abigail both wanted to go back because they were complaining about it being boring. But the 3 of us put too much planning into this to go back, so we convinced them to keep going. To convince them to stay, we had to crack the Henny. I personally don't drink because alcohol tastes like ass, but I decided I would tonight. On the other hand, I smoke like a gumbo amount of pot, and I decided to spark up one of the joints. One thing about me, though, is that when I get drunk and high at the same time, I tend to get super paranoid, and it obviously didn't help that we were 2 miles deep into the woods. After 2 joints, I was starting to feel the weed kick in, and the paranoia started up a bit. I thought that I was hearing footsteps circling around behind us. I felt confident enough in my paranoia, though, to yell out, "Is anyone there?" This probably wasn't the smartest idea, because I think it freaked Abigail and Angela out. Tyler and Jordan asked me what the fuck I was doing, and I told them I thought I heard something. And they said,
Heck no.
"It was probably just an animal, dumbass." And we all 3 laughed. However, I continued to hear what I thought were footsteps following distantly, so I got nervous again. I thought maybe we were in some animal's habitat and just pissed it off or something. I've never seen a black bear in the wild, but I'm pretty sure they're native in eastern Oklahoma, which is where we were. I asked my friends if they thought it could have been a black bear, and they all said they had no idea. We pushed on, however, until we reached the campsite. Once at the campsite, we all sat down at the table since we had just walked 5 miles in the dark. It was around 12:50 or close to 1 at this point, so we decided to indulge in the rest of the stuff we brought. We smoked and drank, and we definitely were being loud as hell. When I drink, the alcohol runs through me, so I have to piss a lot, and that's what happened. I told folks I had to piss, and I went to find a tree. I didn't want one of these drunken bastards to come film my dick while I was peeing, so I decided to walk farther away until they were out of sight. When I was midstream, I heard a leaf and branch get crushed about 15 feet away from me. I didn't think it was one of my friends since the noise came in the opposite direction. I pulled out my phone and flashlight, and I turned it on and nearly shit myself. About 15 feet out there were 4 people wearing all black with hoods on.
Damn, 4 people.
I pulled up my damn pants before the stream was even finished, and I started running and screaming, and I was yelling that we weren't alone and to run. They must have thought I was pranking them until they saw that I was running, because then they all got up and started sprinting. I heard more footsteps behind us and all around us.
Oh, heck no.
I genuinely thought I was about to die since we were so deep in the woods, and it sounded like a tribe of people that must live out there or something. None of us were thinking straight because of the Henny and weed. While we were running, Angela fell, and I guess no one else noticed since only I turned to help her up. Once I got her back to her feet, I couldn't tell where the rest of our group went. The moonlight was barely helping, and I didn't want to turn on my flash and give away our position to the freaks chasing us. This made me start to freak out, which made her even more scared. She was a mess at this point and crying and freaking out, so I had to get her to calm down and keep moving, even though I felt like I was having an anxiety attack. I got her to keep running in the direction I thought they went, but my sense of direction was all messed up. We kept running until we saw what looked like a shed. I came up with the plan to use the shed as cover, while I would try to call the others and use Google Maps to see where we were. We made our way to the shed, and we stopped hearing the footsteps, so I thought that we might have lost them. The shed had 3 rooms and a hallway. As we got into the entrance, the foulest of smell of all time hit my nose and damn near made me throw up all the Henny I had just drank. Angela, however, didn't have quite as strong a stomach as me and threw up instantly. I tried calling our friends, but it would ring, then go straight to voicemail, and I didn't have Abigail's contact. Angela was no help either since her phone was dead. The smell was getting unbearable at this point, and I had a feeling I knew what it was, but I had to make sure. As I explored the 3 rooms in the shed, I arrived upon the room where the stench was coming from. My heart was in my throat at this point. I'm convinced he could have heard my heartbeat from miles away. I nervously pulled out my phone to turn on the flash. Once I tapped the flash, I was met with the most disturbing thing I ever and will ever see. Leaning up against the wall were 2 dead adult corpses with heads, arms, and legs missing. And on the ground in front was what looked like a dead baby.
Damn.
I instantly knew those freaks chasing us were responsible for this. I looked at maps on my phone to see where we were, and we were still 2 miles from any roads. I found Angela and showed her. She was bawling her eyes out, crying about how she doesn't want to die, but I low-key had accepted my fate. I truly thought I was dying tonight, once I heard the footsteps again, racing towards the shed we were in. I grabbed Angela and told her if you don't want to die, she needs to run, and don't look back. I had the idea that I could try to use a distraction to get them away from us. My plan was to run off in the direction the road wasn't, while Angela ran to the road, and I would hide somewhere until they passed by, then I would head for the road. I took off yelling to get their attention. It worked, because as I heard the footsteps coming from me right after. I should mention, I'm in good shape since I used to play sports in middle school, and I still played lacrosse for my high school at the time, so I was capable of running long distances. Once I thought I was far enough away, I got down low to the ground behind a tree and covered myself with leaves and branches to camouflage. I was already wearing all black, so I felt like camouflage was my best chance. My biggest fear came true when I could feel a spider or an insect of some kind crawling down my leg.
Oh, heck no, bro.
I've had insane arachnophobia since I was a little kid, and I've been bitten by spiders before, so that only added to my fear. But it was a miracle, because after what felt like hours, but was probably more like 2 minutes, I could hear the sounds of lots of footsteps running off away from where I was. I still wanted to play safe, and I stayed down there for approximately 15 minutes or so before I thought it was safe to run. Once I was back on my feet, I headed for the direction the road was. I started calling my whole damn contacts list while I was running. It was 2:17 a.m. at this point, so no one was awake. I tried my mom and my dad's cell, but neither picked up after like 5 tries, so I called the house phone. After 2 rings, my dad picked up, all pissed off, asking why I called. I immediately told him the circumstances and about the 3 dead bodies I found, and he started freaking out, asking if they were still following us. I told him that I had lost him, but I was separated from all my friends. While I was on the phone though, Jordan finally noticed I had called and called me back. So I hung up on my dad and I picked up, and he immediately asked me where the fuck I was. I said we got separated and told him where I told Angela to run, and to hopefully meet us there. He said okay, and I hung up to save my battery since I was under 10% at that point. I kept heading in the direction of the road until I saw the asphalt. Angela was hiding and got up when she saw me. She told me that she thought I had been killed. I called Jordan and I sent him my location, and he showed up around 5 minutes later. We were all relieved to see everyone was okay, and Angela and Jordan hugged each other for like 2 minutes straight. Once we were walking back to the vehicles, I told them about the bodies in the shed, and all of them freaked out even more and asked me why I hadn't called the cops yet, so that's what I did. I gave them an approximate location of where the bodies were, but I never heard back, so they must have been moved by that terrible tribe or whatever. This only happened 4 months ago, and I still have recurring nightmares where I'm stranded out there, or I'll see the corpses out of the corner of my eye.
Damn. That's tough, you know? That's actually a tough way, because... Shit, imagine finding that shit. Damn, that shit kind of scarred you, you know? And the little baby, too. There was little baby, too. Fuck, you know. But, shit. Alright, let's continue.
It was July 2008. We had just installed high-speed internet at an impressive 5 megabytes per second. Harry Potter 6 was deferred another year, and Justin Bieber was about to make his big break with the song One Time. And thousands of miles away, there I was, living life in rural Western Canada. The town I lived in was a settlement of perhaps 24 acres clustered together near a lake, and boasted just an elementary school with grades kindergarten through grade 5. and no stores. On this particular day, I was at school on the playground, all alone, swinging and pondering life. None of my friends were around, but the solitude never really bothered me. I was perfectly content, just swinging and pondering life and daydreaming as I often did. That was when I noticed the van behind me. It was your classic creepy van. Older, large, and a boxy white generic van. What struck me as odd was how slow the van was driving. It could not have been driving faster than 10 kilometers per hour. Still swinging, I craned my neck and watched this van slowly creep along, and then out of my line of vision. I thought that was the end of it. But a few minutes later, along comes the van again, ever so slowly.
Heck no, bro. That
It was driving up
That shit just watching for anybody, huh? He's definitely trying to get anybody, huh? That fool's big time tripping, though.
the road in front of the park. The best way to vision where I was is that of a square. The road wraps completely around the playground, which is situated on a slight hill. I watched the van creep along, turn left, and then out of sight. There were trees and houses obstructing my view. And then back behind me it came creeping along, ever slow and present. As I watched it disappear for the second time, I recalled an incident that took place just 2 months prior. In the nearby town where I was attending school, a few kids in the grade below mine had been approached by a man as they walked home from school who offered them candy. He had allegedly been driving a white van. School officials had urged us to stay very vigilant. I began to run across the field, determined to beat the van to that road. Don't panic, I told myself. It's probably not the same guy. And that is when this idea hit me. Oh, the idiotic, dangerously foolish idea hit me. I was going to hide myself in a nearby bush, and as the van crept by, I would obtain its license plate and give it to the police. It would be too easy. 12-year-old self, what were you thinking? Anyways, I wasn't thinking, because I did just that. I hid in the bushes, and I waited, and waited. I waited to no avail. And as I waited, the logical part of my brain kicked in. This was an extremely lonely, well-concealed spot of land. So maybe, just maybe, trying to obtain this license plate was not a smart idea. I suddenly wanted very much to not be in that isolated bush. So abandoning my attempts at being Nancy Drew, I began the journey home with a sense of urgency. As I walked along the dirt road, I took in my surroundings and saw no van. Perhaps it had left the area, I thought hopefully. I turned right, away from the school and playgrounds, and began to walk towards my house. Safety lay just beyond the hairpin turn of a road that I was jauntling along. Suddenly, a loud screeching of tires came into my ear canal. I turned slightly and saw it, the white van.
Damn.
Where it came from, I did not know. But what I did know was that I was extremely isolated and that it was speeding towards me.
What the
It
fuck?
was when my lizard-like brain took over. I no longer thought. I ran. I was no longer a whole being. My sole purpose was to run. I can still feel my sweaty feet sliding around in my sandals, and I can still see my pink skirt frantically trying to keep up with me running, still hearing those squealing tires. I flung myself down the hill. At the foot of it laid my house, my lifeline. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw the van for the last time. It was carelessly turning left and away from me. The next thing I remember, I was standing at the family deep freezer with a red freezy in my hand. Vaguely, I heard a faint voice miles away. I was breathing heavily, hyperventilating really. What happened? What happened? My dad's face was white as a ghost. A hardened man, he looked truly afraid. I spat out the story and bursted into tears, and my dad hugged me. He told me that I was safe and reassured me. Then he left, determined to find this van. As he was gone, I ran throughout the house, locking the doors. It was a large house that contained 4 doors. When my dad returned, he told me he had seen no van. It had disappeared into the afternoon sun. My dad phoned the police right away, and he stressed the similarities between what happened to me to the reports of what happened to my schoolmates. Unfortunately, the police never came to talk to me. I don't think they really cared. I stayed in the house for the next few days, afraid to venture out. But as the days wore, I regained my confidence to return to the park, and life went on. I never did see that van again. I still shudder to think about what may have happened all those years ago if I had let that van catch up to me.
Yeah, well, those stories were pretty fucking trip. They were a trip way. Like the first one, that fool was like, the fool was being weird. The second one was pretty crazy. The bodies and shit and everything. The fool was being chased. Third one, damn, the van one, that one was trip. That one's like, that fool was looking for that fool, to kidnap probably, huh? But other than that, fools, thanks for watching. Peace out.